World Halal Union says that halal market has reached $7 trillion. Wow, that's good money. I wonder how they came up to this and who is benefiting from that $7 trillion. And we have with us Shahed Amanullah to discuss that with us. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
So Shahed, so 1 trillion for you, or who is making this? Shahed Amanullah is co-founder of Zakatify and Zabiha.com, very popular website. So tell us, where are you keeping those trillions?
Well, you have to take this with a grain of halal salt. The problem is that Muslims eat no matter what, and Muslims are not eating any less or more than they used to. The difference is that what they've eaten in the past is now being packaged as halal, and and its halal qualities have been emphasized. This means two different things. In Muslim majority markets, it simply means that the things that they were eating, there's a little bit more emphasis on its halal nature and a little bit more accountability. Otherwise, it's the same thing that they purchased before. And in the West, it means that Muslims are moving toward actively consuming halal products, whereas before they were either consuming non-halal products or finding other ways to do that outside of what would be a halal marketplace. So really what it is, it's more of a measure of Muslim purchasing power when it comes to products that could be designated as halal. And the good news about it is that we are finally quantifying it as a coherent market. The next step, of course, would be to further define what does halal mean in terms of values and quality, and trying to make sure that there's accountability in that market.
So Turkey is doing this week a big halal summit, World Halal Summit or something like that. Are there other summits going around? Other countries are seeing that it's a market which they can use for export purposes?
Absolutely. There have been halal market conferences as far back as I can remember. I think the first ones that I was going to were in 2006, 2007. And back then, a lot of the halal market conferences were being held in Southeast Asia, places like Brunei and Kuala Lumpur. And then as the market started to grow, you started getting more activity in places like Dubai and Istanbul and Saudi Arabia, as they started realizing that there is this global market. You have to understand, in some places where you have nothing but a Muslim population, it's hard to conceive of it as a halal marketplace. For you, it's just a market. But when you're in a pluralist society, like, for example, Malaysia, or the United States or Canada or the UK, then there's a little bit more emphasis on a halal market because it's juxtapositioned against the normal market or the market for everybody else. And what's been really interesting about kind of the halal revolution, as I've seen it in the last 20 years, is that the cultivation of the idea of a halal market really came outside of Muslim majority countries and found its way back in, where it's revitalized halal as a set of values for populations that are almost exclusively Muslim. So it's been really a wonderful kind of cross-pollination between Muslim diaspora communities and Muslim majority countries.
Shahed, you're well aware of the fact that there was a lot of Islamophobic conversation on halal and haram, and mostly on halal in the United States and somewhat in Canada. I don't know, how far did it go?
In different parts of the world, it's gone quite far. If you look in certain countries in Europe, there's an active attempt to ban halal slaughter, even if it means banning kosher slaughter at the same time, by groups of people that frankly are overtly Islamophobic and are trying to use it to penalize their Muslim populations. So halal has become like a bad word in some of these countries, and I'm thinking of Denmark and Belgium and some of these countries. But when you look at North America, for example, we haven't crossed that threshold here. Halal is not a bad word in the mainstream lexicon in North America. That's why you can have a chain called the Halal Guys open up hundreds of outlets in North America, and no one really complains about it. or you can have halal products being sold in Whole Foods and other places. And there's very little outcry. In the UK and other places, when people find out that, for example, KFC in the UK is selling halal chicken, it raises a public outcry from people, from Islamophobic members of that society. And I think in those countries, it's going to take a while to pull it back. But I think we managed to avoid that in North America. And now that it's been established in North America, I don't see really that happening anytime soon, because halal has proven itself in North America as such a cash cow, frankly, for certain industries, is that we'll have a lot of allies among us pushing back against Islamophobia when it comes to halal food.
If it's a $7 trillion market or something like that, close to it, how much of that, United States is controlling? And what is the American interest in halal market? Can we export to these countries? Can we benefit from this market?
Well, the U.S. is a key exporter of halal products to the rest of the world. We have, of course, a very vibrant agricultural ecosystem, and that halal exports have been a part of it for decades now. The U.S. government actively regulates and approves and encourages this export. So we do have a big chunk of that $7 trillion. Now, of course, you have you've got very large ecosystems in Australia and New Zealand, in Brazil, and other countries that have that are heavy meat exporting countries that are joining the fray. And what's really interesting about it is that as you have countries that are starting to ban halal slaughter in Europe, for example, what that does is it creates a demand for the importation of halal products, which is only going to benefit those exporting countries like the US.
It is essentially counterproductive for those European countries who have banned halal and kosher slaughter. So it is counterproductive, but probably in the movement of hate and Islamophobia, losing money seems to be okay. But what about China? I mean, China in 70s and 80s used to export halal product. I have seen on the street in general places Arabic written on different package goods and things like that. Are they foregoing that, or they are benefiting while they are doing their dirty job on Uyghur Muslims?
No, I think that's a really good question. And there's very rarely a market that China can participate in that it doesn't put its all into. I think the halal marketplace is no different. But I think what they're running into is a credibility issue in the global halal marketplace. Not necessarily because of the Uyghur issue. I actually wish that were the case, but because the quality, one of the trademarks of the halal space is that people are attaching quality measurements to what they get at a consumer level as well as a business level. And so when they get halal products from Australia, New Zealand, or from the US, for Brazil, it's attached to the sense of quality that's coming from them. I don't think that halal exports from China are afforded that same opportunity because China has not been a major player in that space for quite a while, and it's going to take a while for them to catch up at the quality level, and then they're going to have to fight this perception that they already have among mainstream Muslim populations that China's really not being a good actor when it comes to their own Muslim population, and so therefore why should we support it with our purchases?
Would you say, Shahed, that Australia and New Zealand might be the leading provider and exporter of halal meats?
Not necessarily in terms of quantity. I think that mantle still goes to Brazil. But in terms of the framework around halal exports, nearly 100% of lamb of lamb exports from Australia and New Zealand are halal. And there's a very strict government program to regulate it, to make sure that the people who are buying it can be assured that it's kind of met every sort of mainstream standard for halal. And this, by the way, is happening even at the same time that there's a very sophisticated anti-halal movement happening in Australia at the consumer level. So at the same time, you have a country that is exporting a lot of halal meat and very high quality meat to the rest of the world, including here in the US. But you also have a grassroots movement that's really upset that that's happening, even though Australians are making money off of this. So it's a very weird situation to see a profit on one side, Islamophobia on the other side, and at some point, there's just a group of people out there that hate Muslims more than they love money. But I don't see that lasting for very long because, as you mentioned, it's a $7 trillion market, and at some point, money can be a great solvent of racism. If somebody can make money off of a Muslim, they're not going to hate them. And so I see that's going to happen in Australia and New Zealand, and I see it's going to happen in North America as well.
Hey, Shahed, are you going to have some halal turkey on your table this Thanksgiving?
This is a great story, and it's a great story of Muslims in America. When I was a child, the idea of getting a halal turkey was almost impossible, and I would have to drive with my family, 20 miles to get halal meat. From where I'm living, just outside Washington, D.C., I can walk to 3 halal markets that can all sell me a halal turkey. And I have a wonderful halal turkey waiting for me just a few blocks away for me to pick up tomorrow. And that has just shown you how much in 20 years we've just changed the landscape of this country. And it's not just a reflection of the availability of halal meat. The fact that you have thousands and thousands of halal turkeys on Thanksgiving, it's an indication of how Muslims have integrated into America and have adopted one of its most popular holidays as their own and have given it their own halal twist.
Well, happy Thanksgiving, Shahed Amanullah, and thank you for your time.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for having me.